Today on the Athlete One podcast.
The baseball that started the Ventura fight. So I was running baseballs that night and sitting on the on-deck circle on my stool, and Nolan throws at Ventura, and here goes the big fight, and I'm watching Bo Jackson out there manhandle people or whatever. And so we move over on the cooler and sit on the coolers on the top step and watch the fight. And so it gets calmed back down and everybody's back on the field, and I go and sit on our bench, and George Bush, who wasn't even governor of Texas yet and surely wasn't president yet, it's the owner. And he leans over to me and the other bat boy. He's like, "Did y'all get their bat boy?" Just joking with us, knowing that he was an employee of the Rangers, right? I mean, but it was just funny for what an experience to be on the field when that happened.
Welcome to the Athlete One podcast. Veteran high school baseball coach Ken Carpenter takes you into life's classroom as experienced through sports. Go behind the scenes with athletes and coaches as they share great stories, life lessons, and ways to impact others.
Today's episode of the Athlete One podcast is powered by the Netting Professionals, improving programs one facility at a time. The Netting Professionals specialize in the design, fabrication, and installation of custom netting for baseball and softball, including backstops, batting cages, BP turtles, screens, ball carts, and more. They also design and install digital graphic wall padding, windscreen, turf protectors, dugout benches, and cubbies. The Netting Pros also work with football, soccer, lacrosse, and golf courses. Netting Professionals continue to provide quality products and services to many recreational, high school, college, and professional fields and facilities throughout the country. Contact them today at 844-620-2707. That's 844-620-2707. Visit them online at www.nettingpros.com or check out Netting Pros on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn for all their latest products and projects. And now to my interview with head baseball coach Johnny Johnson. Hello and welcome to the Athlete One podcast. I'm your host, Ken Carpenter. Joining me today is Johnny Johnson, head baseball coach at James Clemens High School in Alabama. Coach, thanks for taking the time to join me here on the Athlete One podcast.
Yeah, Ken, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, every guest that I've had, and I've had 77, I believe, so far, has a unique story to tell. And yours is probably the first that I've came across that jumped right off the page when I was doing some research on you. And I got to start off with, you were a bat boy for the Texas Rangers. That had to be an awesome experience.
Oh, it was a great experience. And really, I think where I really, really, really fell in love with baseball. I was 16, 17 years old growing up in Arlington, Texas, and got to bat boy for the Rangers. And we're talking old school Rangers now, like the old stadium, like 2 stadiums ago now at the old Arlington Stadium, the last 2 years of that. And got to be around Nolan Ryan his last 2 years. And, you think about Juan Gonzalez and Pudge Rodriguez and Rafael Palmeiro and Canseco. They had some big time guys come through during that time. Now, we weren't very good. But what an experience just to be in the locker room with those guys and go out and shag BP and George Bush was the owner at the time, sitting right behind me every night. It wasn't like today where we're behind a screen and all that. We were on a bench with a skull cap on the on-deck circle, and so it was just a tremendous time in my life and really where I think I fell even more in love with baseball than I already was.
How does one go about becoming a bat boy?
Well, it's just like anything else. It's who you know. We just happened to have somebody from the front office that worked at our church or that went to our church, and he got me an interview with the clubhouse manager. And so I went and interviewed and really was lucky to get that job because I know there was quite a few and it helps knowing somebody. And then it's just what you do with it, right? You spent 2 years working hard and doing things and actually ended up winning a Bat Boy of the Year award. And I was the first ever Major League Baseball clubhouse manager scholarship recipient. So I had to apply for that and ended up winning that little bit of scholarship money when I first went to school, to college.
Well, that's fantastic. And, a lot can be said that when you take on a job, you do it 100% and you really do a good job at it. There'll be benefits at the end.
Oh, there's no doubt. And, something you want to pass on, we talked about coaching our sons off the air. And, my son has actually been blessed enough. We live in a town in Madison, Alabama that has the Rocket City Trash Pandas, a AA team. And so he spent this summer bat boying for them for the first time ever. And actually has done a good enough job, has been asked to be in the clubhouse as an assistant clubhouse guy a bunch, and has really loved that side of the game and is curious about continuing in that side of the game. So, and that's what I told him when he went into it. Just keep your head down and just work hard and do whatever they ask, right? And we've all started that way, whether it's coaching or other careers. It's just keep your head down, do your job. So,
and that's probably one of the best minor league travel nicknames that are out there, the Trash Pandas.
Yeah, he told me the other day they were the number one sold merchandise in all of minor league baseball. I didn't realize that. But
wow,
pretty cool.
I like that. Well, I want to get to the good stuff here with you because you're such a good coach, and in my research, I love digging into stats of highly successful coaches. And a number that jumped right off the board at me was in 2021, your high school team stole 204 bases, and you had 9 players that had double-digit stolen bases. It's safe to say you're aggressive and you like putting pressure on the defense.
Absolutely. I think, if you get labeled as a certain type of coach, whether it's a pitching guy or whatever, I mean, the base running side of things and pressure is something that I think we're definitely known for at both my stops, at Fort Payne High School before James Clemens. I've spoken at some conventions on aggressive baseball, and I just think at this level that game plays. I know the pro game got away from it for a long time. But I think at the high school level, you got to put pressure on 14 to 17-year-olds and make them make quick decisions. And so I love the pressure bunt game, not necessarily sack bunts, but pressure bunts. I think that the stolen base still plays at our level. I think that, even the way you take the field or how you play defense and how you attack a strike zone, all that is aggressive pressure baseball. And so that's something we preach. And in 2021, we was the first time we set the school record for wins. We did it again last year. And, those kids bought into what we were selling on the bases and really it's a mindset, but then they had some instincts to go with it, right? Some of that stuff you just can't teach when it comes to instinctual baseball. And we can teach the process of it till we're blue in the face, but you got to have kids that understand it and actually process it. And that year was a special year. And I think we ended up, third or fourth on the all-time list in Alabama in stolen bases. So we definitely turned them loose. That's for sure. Well,
like you said, the players probably love that style of coaching, I would think.
Well, what is the Earl Weaver, waiting on the 3-run homer or whatever, at our level doesn't play a whole lot because we don't always have guys that can hit the 3-run homer. And our ballpark's a big ballpark for high school. And so, where there's other programs that have maybe bigger physical kids or they have small ballparks for both, we don't have that. We've got kids that are normal sized kids and kids that are athletic. And we play in a big ballpark. And so that style of game matches what we have. And if you ever look, I have not won a state championship. But if we ever do get there and when we do get there, it's played in a college ballpark. And so, that style of play plays no matter where we go. Right. And that style of play doesn't go in a slump very often. We can find ways to score without getting a bunch of base hits.
Well, I got to ask, you've been doing it for quite some time. Opponents know you're going to steal when you show up at their park. And how, the number that goes with 2021 is you were successful 80% of the time and you had 9 guys stealing. What's the secret to that success? Is it, you say they
it's funny. I don't know that there's a huge secret, right? Like I think, I get asked that question a lot by other coaches is, hey, can we sit and talk base running? I'd love to. I don't have a ton to share, right? we've tried a lot of different things. The Mike Talrico and Roberts and all those guys. I love listening to those guys speak about base running. And we've tried a lot of that with the new school lead or the vault leads, and we do some of that. And some groups get it, and 2021 group really did. Last year we struggled with that, had to go away from it some, and that's where the instincts come in, right? But the biggest thing is creating a mindset in your culture, like how we practice, how we reward taking the extra base, even not just stealing a base, how we reward stealing, like. We'll scrimmage early in the year, and if you get caught stealing or you try to stretch a single into a double, we'll just put you back on the next bag. Like we don't want them to feel defeated and feel like we're scolding them for getting thrown out early in the year. We want to build a mindset of fearlessness. We practice diving back into the bag a lot because we can't be worried about being picked off and be aggressive. And so we have to know that we can get back. So we practice that a lot. And we're lucky now, especially. I used to beat up my outfield grass awful working on dive backs. We have turf on our infield now on one of our fields on campus. So we can practice on that turf more, not tear a bunch of stuff up or ourselves. But just creating a total mindset of fearlessness is important. And I think that's the secret sauce, is how we as coaches handle failure in the things we're asking them to do. I heard somebody one time talk about, if your dog gets on the couch and you don't want him there and you pop him on the behind or scold him, he's not going to want to get back on that couch. Well, if my guy gets picked off trying to be aggressive or steals a base and his timing's bad and I scold him coming back in the dugout, he's not going to want to steal anymore. And so changing our mindset as coaches was important in creating that culture.
That's great, because I had Tim Held on from Cincinnati Moeller, and I was talking to him about when they were in the state championship a few years back, they set the record for the most stolen bases in a state championship.
Like 12, wasn't it?
Yeah. And
I heard that. That's crazy. That's a lot.
Yeah. And it's a mentality. And, I think that's the way the teams that are good and the coaches that are good out there across the country, they love that aggressive mentality.
Well, and I think something else it does, and this is something that a lot of people miss, is it makes the other teams worry. Like, we may not steal the next game. We may not lay down a bunt the next game, but they spent a lot of time this week worrying about bunt coverages and stolen base, holding guys on. Like, they're going to spend an unordinary amount of time worrying about that for big games against us, whether we do it or not. And I think that's an advantage. When you talk about aggressive baseball, I think just how we get on and off the field is important. I think it sends a message, and it's not just the message of, man, we're going to be high energy, whatever, but we have a whole deal. And I stole this from somebody a long time ago, and I can't even remember where I got it, from a collegiate baseball newspaper or whatever, but we time them getting on and off the field. Well, if we get our first hitter of the inning on deck, batting gloves, helmet on, ready to take his practice swings before their first warm-up pitch, they get a plus on this little chart we keep. If we get on the field defensively and throw our first warm-up pitch before their last guy gets to the dugout, they get a plus on our little chart we keep. And in our mentality, it's not just about hustling people thinking we're crazy. It's, I get to watch 5 warm-up pitches before I get to the plate. I'm ready to hit. I get done throwing my 5 warm-up pitches, and we've thrown it down before he's got his batting gloves on, ready to lead off, and we get out number 1 because he's not ready. And so the little things that may sway a game just by a little bit of hustle. And on the side note is the umpires love it, right? Because especially early in the season when it's cold. I know y'all know about cold in Ohio, but even in North Alabama, it's cold early. And so umpires too, man, Coach, I appreciate you guys, how they get on and off the field, get this game going. Well, that's because there's so many other benefits to being hustling and being aggressive, right?
And it doesn't require talent.
No, and that's another thing. We're not, like I said, we don't have the monsters that some of these schools run out there. I don't have a ton of draft picks, but it keeps us competitive by playing the game that way.
Well, you were a high school pitcher and you pitched at the college level, and then you took that and became a D1 pitching coach at what it used to be as the University of Texas Pan American.
Yeah, now Rio Grande Valley now, right?
Yeah. What do you tell your incoming freshmen to your high school team who want to pitch at the D1 level? Because you were a recruiting coordinator also, so you kind of know what you're looking for at that level.
Yeah, unless you go check our record back then, I may not have known what I was looking for, but no, I'm just playing. What a great experience coaching in college was, and especially at that level. I mean, I got to see a lot of good baseball. I mean, we played Texas and Texas A&M and Arizona and Nebraska and Oklahoma. I mean, we traveled because we were independent at the time, and so for us to have any chance to get in, we had to play a tough schedule. And so you saw some of the best players in the country. And obviously the good Lord's going to bless some guys, and some guys aren't going to be blessed with certain kind of talent. The biggest thing I think's helped us on the mound, and my pitching coach, TJ Orr, he's my associate head coach, been a college pitching coach as well. And, we're on the same page with this is we chart A3P after 3 pitches. That's old one pitch warrior guy, deal. Win the 1-1, all those things. But if we can throw multiple pitches for strikes and just attack the strike zone, hitters get themselves out. And I don't think that changes at any level. Obviously, you got to have better stuff at higher levels, and you may have to start throwing the halves of the plate at times. But if early in the count I can just attack, hitters are in the disadvantage, and that's a tough mentality for a young pitcher to understand because they get it caught up into what other people think and the ego of the situation. And man, I don't want to give up a hit. I don't want to have a ball hit hard, even if it's foul. That kind of, changes their mentality. And the reality of the situation is Hall of Famers are getting out 70% of the time. And so if we can get them to understand I have the advantage and just throw it to the middle and let it work. I actually saw a tweet this morning before we talked from a guy, and I don't remember who it was, but with the Tampa Bay Rays, talking about them taking guys and turning them into something special. And that was his deal. When he got traded there, their mentality was just throw your nastiest stuff to the middle of the zone and let it work, because the chances you hit in the middle of the zone are very slim anyway, right? So just be nasty to the middle of the zone and get outs. And so if we can get them to have that mentality and overcome the fear of what other people think if I give up a hit, that's the big thing.
Well, you've been on both ends of it now. You're a high school coach, and you've also been a recruiting coordinator at the college level. What are some mistakes that you see high school players and their parents making in the whole recruiting process?
Wow, we could talk for hours. The landscape has changed so much since I was in college baseball. I mean, you're talking, this is my 20th year in high school. And so the landscape's changed on how recruiting happens. The travel ball phenomenon is, taken over. How you recruit, when I used to recruit back then, I was going to junior college tournaments. I was going to high school games, and now they spend a lot of times at their summer league stuff. And in the summers, we didn't do a ton back then because there wasn't a ton. You go find an American Legion game or something like that. But I spent a lot of time fishing in the summers. Maybe that's why our record wasn't very good. But by the time we got to summer, a lot of that stuff was done. Now it's all in the summer. But even that's gotten watered down. So I think the biggest thing is they've got to trust the coaches they're around that are going to have connections in your area. I think the travel ball deal is a necessary evil at this point. My son has played it his whole career, who is now a senior. But I think the travel we do in that is crazy. Like, my kids from North Alabama don't need to go to Florida and North Carolina because those people aren't recruiting my kids. And my kids aren't going over there to play. Like, they're going to play somewhere in Alabama, maybe Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia. But I think we spend a lot of money going all over the country to play in these tournaments, chasing scholarships that are not there, and from places that are not going to recruit our kids. And so having some kind of realistic dialogue with your parents, with your players about where they fit, or right now, are you a junior college guy? Are you a Division II guy? Are you a Power 5 guy? If you're a Power 5 guy, go travel the country because that's legit, right? Yeah. But if you're going to be a local junior college guy, there's no sense in spending that kind of money and going all over the country when ultimately you're going to play at the local junior college.
Right. How do you experience it, but now you're also the parent too. So is there anything we can do to get I want to say like travel tournaments who are making a boatload of money off of this to try to make it a better experience for everybody involved.
Boy, it's going to take a monumental mind shift, and I don't know how that happens. We've had this discussion, and look, and I talk out both sides of my mouth a little bit because we have 2 fields on campus. We're blessed with that, and one of them has a turf infield. We host PG stuff almost every weekend. You know, being in Huntsville, Alabama, which is a metropolitan area, we're close to Nashville and Birmingham, and so a lot of teams will come in here and play. And they're not the biggest PG tournaments, but it's basically what your old rec league was, honestly. If you look at the talent that shows up in Madison, Alabama every weekend to play PG events, it's the talent level of the old rec leagues. Good players, not your very top end, right? And so we make money off the travel circuit. I mean, we do. It's helping pay for that turf. I mean, it is what it is. It's a business. But I just think it would take a monumental shift of, you know, when I was in high school in the early 90s, the first travel teams were starting to show up. The Dallas Mustangs, the Fort Worth Cats, and they were loaded. I'm talking about Division I talent. They were going to these showcases. Then they would play in their Connie Mack World Series in New Mexico, so they still played in the league. But only the best of the best played with those guys. The rest of us were playing for our local leagues with our local teams. You know, Lamar High School was playing against a group from Martin High School and Sam Houston High School in that Arlington area. And then we'd take an all-star team and go play somewhere and have a ball together, which is what turned into travel baseball, right? That little all-star team. But now everybody's got a travel team. And so it's just, I don't know how you get it back to your more localized situation and still have there be a business aspect to it because there's too much money being made. I just feel like the top end guys need to keep doing it. I think some of the lower end guys are getting lost in that shuffle. And you even look at the World Wood Bat. I mean, there's 420 teams over there when we went last week. And you got teams that are really competitive and should be there. And then you got teams that are in there getting beaten 19-1 and spend a ton of money to come down there and get killed from New York or wherever. And I feel bad for those teams because they're caught up in the money grab, I feel like.
Well, you know, you see a lot of things on Twitter where coaches like yourself and you know, I experienced because we hosted these travel tournaments. What message would you send to coaches I was always big on take care of your dugout and, you know, make it easy on the person that's hosting the field because some teams do a great job and other teams just leave it a mess. And it's a lot of extra work for a coach that isn't getting paid a whole lot of money in high school baseball.
Yeah, it's tough because you know, that's one of the things, the guys that do it right, you know, leave it better than you found it and pick your stuff up and take care of things. And, you know, we host a lot of events and we've got some that do a really great job of it. And then you got, you know, with that turf infield, there's signs all in the dugout and I need bigger signs, I guess. No seeds, no gum, no spikes, right? And I'll show up and there's seeds spit all over there that you got to rake up and do it by hand. And then, you know, you got a mound out there that's all tore up because guys have been in spikes all weekend on it. And, you know, so it's part of I guess it's part of the good and bad of hosting, you know, and same goes in the stands. I mean, a tent will break and somebody will just leave it over there for you to deal with. Right. You know, it's just people have different views on what's appropriate and what's not, I guess. And, you know, it is what it is, part of the doing business. I guess it's no different than having a restaurant or whatever else. You're going to have people that respect what you have and people that don't. And, you know, I don't want to complain too loudly because people may quit coming, right? And we want to have a nice facility where people want to come back and we want to keep it nice. And so our coaches do and parents and people like that do a great job and work hard to keep our place nice where people want to come back.
You know, I always think about when I go to the grocery store and you see that cart that's sitting next to a car and all they had to do was go 20 more feet and put it in the rack.
That's right. Same deal.
Well, when you made the transition from a college coach to high school, what were some of the big adjustments that you had to make? And how did you go about doing it that made you the successful coach that you are right now?
Boy, it wasn't overnight like I thought it would be. I promise you that. Because I went from coaching college baseball and doing a year of independent ball to coaching at a high school that had not had a whole lot of success at Fort Payne in about a decade or more, and teaching elementary PE to kindergarten to second graders. So that was a huge adjustment the first few years on all fronts. But I think the biggest thing was I treated all of them like they were on scholarship and college kids for a while. I was tough on them, probably yelled and screamed and said some words I shouldn't have said. And, I was young and figuring it out still. And I was taking over a program that hadn't been asked to work a whole lot. It was just something you kind of did during the off season for football. Right. And so we didn't even have an athletic block. Everything was after school. It was just like starting from ground zero in a lot of ways for a program that was going to be run correctly. And it took me about 3 years of being that guy and figuring out, this is not working. My guys still love me. I still talk to a lot of those guys. And they joke on how soft I am now compared to what I was when we first got there. But, maybe they needed some tough love early on. And then I had to figure out some middle ground. They had to figure out how to work. I had to figure out what high school kids needed and realize they're not all on scholarship. They don't love it like I do, but we can all work hard and get better. And, those first 3 years were tough. We went 8 wins, 7 wins, 5 wins. And I thought, man, I cannot coach. What have I done? I should have stayed in college, whatever, because you think, well, I'm coming out of college. I can take this high school team and win immediately. Right. And really the best advice I got, there was an old coach that used to retire from Miami of Ohio and lived in South Texas. And when I took this job, I ran into him before my first season at the National Convention in Nashville. And he said, man, I'm so glad you took that job. And I'm like, why are you glad I left college baseball to go to Fort Payne, Alabama? And he said, you're going to really learn what it means to be a real coach. He said, in college, you're pigeonholed. You're a pitching guy. You're a hitting guy, whatever. He said, you're going to have to learn everything now. And I didn't get that until about that third year when I was trying to figure out, how do we turn a double play? What do I need to teach my hitters here? And, and what bunt coverage and all those things that you don't think about when all I got's my pitchers. And so you really, the base running, right? I was a slow-footed pitcher my whole career. So now that base running and bunting is kind of my thing and I love, it's because I had to learn it. And so by year 4, we jumped to 20 wins, and then we went on a roll for about 8 years of 20 plus wins and some area championships. And, so that transition was tough, me learning all those new things and then trying to figure out how to deal with high school kids and parents.
If you could go back in your career as a high school coach and get a do-over on something, what would it be?
Ooh, wow. That's always a tough question because going through those things made me the coach I am now, right? Like I had to have some of those failures and tough times to figure out what I needed and how it would work. I wish I would have learned some of those lessons earlier coming in. I'm maybe not so confident in who I was as a coach to not see that I needed to change, but who's to say the program would have been where it was in year 4 if I wouldn't have been that tough guy? Like it's such a hard to go back and say, hey, I want to change X, Y, or Z. I wish I would have taken some of this aggressive stuff I really know now and know better on how to put it into play for like my 2011 team. Like we were aggressive in 2011. We were 31-10 at Fort Payne that year, and a really good, probably the best team I had there, most athletic for sure. And we stole a ton of bases because we were just aggressive, but I didn't have a plan for it, right? It was just mentality at that point. Knowing 10 years later what I know about some of the stuff on the base paths and the bunt game and how we do some things now, well, we could have really been dangerous in 2011, right? Like you'd like to have some of this knowledge you have as an old coach back when I was younger. But as far as changing things, I don't know that I would, just because I needed those experiences to become who I am now.
Definitely. Well, since, you kind of led into it for me there, what is a drill that is your favorite drill that you love to teach your guys every year that maybe some coaches out there don't do it, or, it's just your drill that you do every year with your guys?
We're talking about the aggressive side of the game. One of my favorite things, and this is a scrimmage deal. It's called a ball stop scrimmage is what we call it. And, whether it's coach pitch, whether it's off a live arm, really the coach pitch version of this is really good because you get a lot of reps and kids get balls and play more. But basically the way it's played is if I get a single, I've got to stretch it into a double. You cannot stop running that bases aggressively until the ball stops you. So if I hit that single straight at the left fielder, I've got to go for two. If I hit the double, ball into the right center gap and it's a double, but probably not a triple, you've got to go to third. You cannot stop going until the ball stops you. And for us in teaching the aggressive side of the game, we learn what we can and can't take extra bases on. Oh, and the other thing is there's no failure, right? Once I get thrown out at third, I just go back to second. If I get thrown out stretching that single into a double, I just go back to first and we play it from there. So there's no failure. There's no fear of failure there. So not only are we learning what we can and can't take extra bases on, but it's forcing my defense to run clean cuts and relays. For them to try to get that out. So from the defensive side, they've got to be aggressive to go get the baseball to cut it off. They've got to hit a cutoff man and make a good throw to third or wherever it is. Defensively, they've got to play the game cleanly and at a high pressure situation. So that ball stop scrimmage is wonderful in my opinion. It's one of my all-time favorites. And like I said, it's all the conditioning you need off a coach pitch because it is nonstop run, cut balls off, make throws. You don't have to play it very long and everybody's gassed and you've had a great end of your practice or whatever conditioning wise and getting some high pressure situations.
I love that because it teaches every part of the game. And probably one of the things that drives me crazy is when you see a kid get a single and, they barely round first and then they're taking their batting glove and slipping on their oven mitt. And it's like, I'd like to see those guys get out there as far as they can.
Yeah, it drives me nuts to see that. And I actually coach first base for our team. That's something a little different that we do too. As a head coach, I coach first. And boy, if they do that, I'm on them pretty hard usually. if we're not at least giving us a round to see what happens, if you're going to bobble it or throw it away, give yourself a chance, right?
Yes. Well, let me ask you that since you mentioned it. Why coach first base rather than third?
I coached third all my career at Fort Payne. And in the last few years, I started to have a discussion with my assistant about switching. And, at that time, I don't know, he really didn't want to take over third. I don't know if he was ready to take what he felt like was that responsibility. And so when I took the job at James Clemens, I mentioned Coach Orr earlier, who's our associate head coach, who's been a head coach in high school and been a college coach. And he and I think a lot alike when it comes to the aggressiveness stuff. And so he was comfortable at third. Well, with a lot of the new base running stuff we were doing, I felt like me being at first base was more advantageous from talking those guys through reads. When are we going to shuffle? When are we not? When are we in an old school, 12-foot lead? All those things. It allowed me to be there and talk those kids through that. There's a lot more that goes on at first base than people give credit. We can't score unless you get past first base. And we really want you at second or third. And so I may spend the whole game at third base and never have a guy at my back, right? If the day is going wrong. But I'll have a lot of guys at first base. And so I felt like I could impact the game on the base running side a lot more being at first base. And so I switched to that and had a guy I trusted at third to make the big decision, right? Do we send you or do we not? And so it's worked well for us. And I give signs and everything right there at first base. We just do it a little backwards. And it's allowed me to really talk through some things with base runners that you normally wouldn't get that opportunity to do. Or you'd have to have a guy that you trust over there to do that. Like if your assistant is your base running guy, then let him be over there. But since I was the base running guy, I just felt like that was a better spot for me. And really the first guy that I ever saw do it, Danny Heap. He played with the Mets and Dodgers back in the 80s. And he was the head coach at Incarnate Word College in San Antonio. And when I played against him and then coached against him out there when my first coaching job, and he coached first base. And I never knew why and why that mattered until I, was in high school and coaching base running and thought, that makes a lot of sense. I saw Coach Heaps do that. And I'm going to go to first base. So
there you go. I like that. Well, I know that you got to get your son off to a college visit for this morning. So what I wanted to do is I love to do rapid fire at the end of the podcast and kind of hit you with things and see how you respond to them. If you could make one change to high school baseball, what would it be?
One change to high school baseball. Um, you know, it's not a rules deal. I think the biggest thing that drives me nuts at this point is the way some of these teams act. And maybe I got a little bit of an old school mentality to me. And look, if you want to hit a bomb and flip the bat a little bit or watch it, I mean, that stuff's whatever. I really don't. But some of the taunting that goes on from dugouts and, teams that do that or just the look at me mentality that is, and a lot of that's what we see in the big leagues a little bit. And we see it on Sports Center and Twitter and, the social media deal of, hey, how many likes and dopamine hits can I get from my likes has taken over the baseball a little bit. And we've lost the respect for each other, I feel like. And so that's something baseball-wise that's crept into the high school game that I don't think belongs at all. And it's kind of a little soapbox I've been on the last couple of years, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, if you could trade places with one professional athlete for one game, who would you pick and why? And your choices are Michael Jordan in the playoffs, Shohei Ohtani getting a chance to pitch and bat in the same game, Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, or Tiger Woods winning the Masters.
Ooh, God, those are tough ones right there. I think it would probably be Shohei Ohtani, just because, as a kid, I grew up, I'm a huge Nolan Ryan fan, obviously being from Texas and bat boying his last 2 seasons and all those things. And I always wondered, man, what would it feel like to throw one pitch 100 miles an hour? Right? Like, I just want to feel what that feels like and know that I can go in and dominate somebody. So to be able to do that and turn around and hit one 500 feet, just to do that for one day would be pretty amazing from a baseball standpoint, just because not many guys. I know everybody thinks everybody throws 97 to 100 now. No, they don't. Right? Like on TV, we're seeing the best of the best, right?
Yep.
And so to be able to do both like he does, I saw a stat the other day through his first 100 games, him and Babe Ruth are like neck and neck as far as wins and losses and also a number of home runs or something, so he's doing something that we have not seen since Babe Ruth, right? And may never see again in our lifetime. So I think Ohtani would be the guy. That wasn't a rapid fire answer, was it?
There you go. What has been your best experience as a high school coach?
Best experience as a high school coach. Ooh, God, that's tough too. It's really not the wins, right? Like, it's other things that I think about that are good experiences. There's been emotional moments, whether it's hugging a senior's neck that you really care a lot about. We do a best buddies night every year with our special needs kids in our town. They got a Madison Best Buddies group that we do one night a week with those kids that are special needs come out and hang out on the field before the game or go to a Miracle League. Our Coaches Association, which I'm a part of, is big on the Miracle League stuff. Those things are bigger memories for me than even some of the wins. The wins you forget about, and it's really those experiences. I can't nail down one, but it's really the emotional grab of those experiences that's something you'll remember more than whether we won an area championship in 2011, right?
Right. That I totally agree with you on that. And to finish up, I got to go back to the Bat Boy.
Okay.
Best story or funniest story that the average person wouldn't know about your times as the Texas Ranger Bat Boy. Do you have like a great Nolan Ryan or?
Well, this one's easy. This one's easy, and I think other people have heard this story before. So I was the Bat Boy that provided the baseball that started the Ventura fight. So I was running baseballs that night and sitting on the on-deck circle on my stool, and Nolan throws at Ventura, and here goes the big fight, and I'm watching Bo Jackson out there manhandle people or whatever. And so we move over on the cooler and sit on the coolers on the top step and watch the fight. And so it gets calmed back down and everybody's back on the field, and I go and sit on our bench, and George Bush, who wasn't even governor of Texas yet and surely wasn't president yet, it's the owner. And he leans over to me and the other Bat Boys like, "Did y'all get their Bat Boy?" just joking with us, knowing that he was an employee of the Rangers, right? I mean, but it was just funny for what an experience to be on the field when that happened. Number one of the most iconic moments in all of baseball. But then to turn around and George Bush, did y'all get their bat boy? So funny story. Those stories from bat boy days are good.
That's fantastic. That could be one of the best answers to any rapid fire I've done, and I love that. So, Coach, I can't thank you enough for taking the time before you had to get out there and do a college visit with your son and getting up early this morning and doing this. It means so much to me as a fellow coach to get a chance to talk to someone like you, and I really think that anybody that listens to this podcast will take away some great info that they can apply to their coaching or playing experience. And once again, it's Johnny Johnson, head baseball coach at James Clemens High School. Coach, thanks again.
No, thank you for having me. I enjoy your show and all you're doing for the game of baseball.
This episode of the Athlete One podcast has been powered by the Netting Professionals, improving programs one facility at a time. Contact them today at 844-620-2707. That's 844-620-2707. Or visit them online at www.nettingpros.com. If you or your company would like to sponsor the Athlete One podcast, or you would like to be a guest on an upcoming episode, feel free to reach out to us at www.athleteone.net. And as always, thanks for listening.